Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. I had one of those things happen again where I listened to a late night diversity in comics video on Thundercats Roar, and I highly recommend you watch that one if you haven't already. Zach talks about toxic anti masculinity in cartoons and how he sees kind of one key aspect of the problem with Thundercats Roar is that it's sissified these characters. These were iconic. I never even watched the original show, but from what I know about them, just by looking at them, they're iconic, hyper masculine adventure characters, and the girls who go on adventures, they're hyper feminine. They all look beautiful and idealized, and you can definitely see sort of the cheesy, goofy Steven Universe influence on the new version of these characters. And I think I'm not going to say I have a moderate position on it, but my first reaction was, oh, I don't like this. And then I started thinking about it. Why don't I like this? And this maybe prompts an opportunity to think about some good things for my own art and storytelling and for all you guys' art and storytelling. So this is partially about Thundercats, but the original video idea I had percolating in my head before I watched our boy Zach's video was good things I learned from my teachers about art and writing. And this is a bit dangerous because there's a few vaguely related ideas, which means hopefully I don't end up talking about those beautiful ducks I saw one time in the early days of this YouTube channel. So let me say what may be the most important thing first so I don't lose this in the train of thought. Do not fantasize about your imaginary world and your characters without having paper and writing materials in front of you. This is something I learned from one of my drawing instructors, the badass. And this changed everything because you may have had the experience of, fantasizing about the fantasy world and then it trickles away and you forget it forever. And as I've been looking at my notes for my own comic project, I am so glad I took my teacher's advice because I realized I had whole critical character moments and ideas about the main character's past that I wrote down in a little note that I have completely forgotten since then. And if I hadn't written it down, I would have lost whole aspects of these characters' personalities, not like critical plot important things that happen. I always kind of go to the critical plot important moments when I'm imagining stories, but I would have lost interesting side scenes and extra details. And all of this is way too much to put into one story, which is why I'm editing and cramming it down. But having this helps me remember what story I wanted to tell when I was kind of in the rush of imagining the world. Because I actually don't, even though I talk about, analysis and morality and art on this channel a lot, when I'm writing, I actually don't, stop and say, okay, here are the archetypes I'm using. Oh, here are the tropes I'm using. I actually just sit down and write and draw. And so what's funny is I just kind of go by ear when I'm telling stories, but then I'll think critically about other people's stories because I don't want to nitpick my own story to death. Now, I'm talking obliquely about my own comic. I've chatted about this on Twitter a bit. I think it's just sort of natural for me to do that since I'm working on it. So now that when I hear our boy Zach talk about something interesting in cartoons or comics, then I start thinking about what I want to do in comics. So what I'll just say is that a lot of things from my time as an art student are coming together, things I've learned from people in the community, hearing their perspectives. It's starting to come together in my own work, which is one reason I'm so excited. So what's my take on the Thundercats Roar show? Well, I think the reason I had an initial bad reaction is I think that the Steven Universe Adventure Time style, it's not that it's entirely bad, it's that it's overdone and it's starting to feel stagnant. And the reason I forced myself to think about this is I realized, well, I could bark on about, this cartoon and how sucky it is and how cartoons were much better when I was growing up. But a lot of Cartoon Network shows from the 90s and 2000s did have a very simple, straightforward style. Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, they very much would have very simple shapes and very simple ideas. So is it just nostalgia? Do I let my shows off the hook but not new shows? And what I think I'll do to defend my initial reaction is that a lot of those, the young what would you call them? The scrappy young Cartoon Network artists who took over for the old Hanna-Barbera cartoonists. They did have a very simple cartoony style based on simple shape that was influenced by CalArts. But I think there was still an appeal to those characters that's lacking in the Steven Universe characters. Now, the Steven Universe characters, the Adventure Time characters, these Thundercat characters, they still look friendly, they still look nice, but I think there's something vaguely off-putting about them. And I think that comes from everybody drawing the same way for too long and not getting enough variety mixed into the bag of their styles. And the best illustration of this is when anime styles cross over into the valley of just looking creepy. Like the anime girl's going to reach out and grab you and rip your head off because she's really an alien in a cutesy Japanese schoolgirl body. And you see this through the history of anime and manga. An Akira Toriyama will get super popular, and you'll see a lot more Dragon Ball Z influence in people's styles. When what is it? Rurouni Kenshin, Rurouni Kenshin, I think, gained enough popularity that you started seeing other artists imitate that style. Who am I thinking of? Ranma One Half, and that anime with the guy who's a dog, Inuyasha. When Inuyasha got super popular, Tom Preston clearly had influence from that mangaka, and Tom Preston's probably the best example of an artist to don't do anything that Tom Preston did, and you will already be on the path to becoming a successful writer and artist. Okay, now you see, this is why I said the important thing first, because now I'm going down the tangent of almost talking about Tom Preston. So I want to talk about things I learned from my art teachers about the craft of storytelling in comics that I think would be useful. So the number one advice I would impart would be, do not imagine without your paper and pencil in front of you, and do spend some time thinking about the morality of the story you want to tell. And I've had this reinforced by reading Boku no Hero Academia. I've had this reinforced by listening to Douglas Ernst take ideas from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life and apply that to comics, where Jordan Peterson will talk about the meaning of Michelangelo's David as an idealized beauty, an image of heroism, and this is what connects with us. We look at this idealized vision and we imagine a better version of ourselves, and the anti-beauty idea just sees a negative reflection on themselves and they want to tear down the image of beauty. It's great. There's a lot of thought and feedback and back and forth going on in this community that's completely relevant to power and storytelling. So here's, I think, the fresh take I got from our boy Zach's video, is that he is observing something in the comics industry, and when he talks about Thundercats, he's observing it in contemporary cartoons that feels missing from our stories, including Star Wars, which is this idea of a fantasy, this idea of gravitas to an adventure story. Where sure, you can have silly, fun moments, you can have comedic moments, but even as I watch the Thundercats cartoon, and I think, okay, that action sequence looks kind of nice. Okay, they kind of look, fun. They might be funny characters. Nothing about the ad for Thundercats Roar says gravitas, seriousness, or even the subtlest hint of it. Everything just looks like a jovial little lark where it won't have much impact on me down the road. And talking with people in the comics community has made me think about stories from my childhood that helped me become a better person, that helped me internalize ideas about heroism and bravery. It's made me pay attention to children's books, looking for good and bad examples of that kind of thing. I've watched the old G.I. Joe cartoon for the first time in my life with young people, and I will find as the kids I babysit, as they ask me questions about the Joes, why are they doing this? Who are those Joes? When I explain what the G.I. Joes are, I have to use ideas like loyalty and virtue. There's no other way to explain what the Joes are. Now, do you get that kind of, will we get that kind of depth and heroism in the new Thundercats? Well, I'd be willing to give Thundercats Roar a chance, but nothing about what it says it wants to be speaks of heroism or of sacrifice or of this kind of depth, which, goofy cartoons from the 80s, even though they were kind of goofy and, they had the silly laser cannons, they were still able to evoke that idea very often, so that years later, decades later, you can talk about these ideas, you can talk about these characters from your childhood, and still make application to real world problems. Oh, and this is why I said they're separate ideas, but they're all related. So, our boy Grand Comics is doing a series on the Berserk manga, and he reads through it. He gives some of his perspective on the meaning of the scenes in it, and I've really been enjoying that series. I'm now reading Berserk for the first time thanks to him. I had watched the old anime, and now I really want to read that manga because it's a good anime, but it can't even compare to just the majesty of that style. But my first thought when I finished the not just when I finished it, but as I was watching the Berserk anime for the first time, is I thought this is a similar appeal to when I would watch Shakespeare being performed by actors who knew what they were doing. And if you love comics, if you love cartoons, if you love good movies and good storytelling, I'm telling you, give William Shakespeare another shot. If you're having trouble with the language, find one of those nice college texts that helps modernize it a bit so you can follow a bit better, or watch Shakespeare being performed by actors who know how to convey emotion. And that'll help immensely because Shakespeare captures a lot of the things that are good about storytelling that I think are missing in SJW Marvel, missing in, I don't know if when I watch or if I watch Thundercats Roar, if it's just going to be a completely trite, dumb show. I'm just saying that's my first impression of it. But if it turns out that that kind of aspect of heroism and greatness and virtue is missing from Thundercats Roar, then what I'd say is Shakespeare has that, and Berserk has that. These characters are driven by their virtue and their vices towards their catastrophe in the tragedies, and in the Shakespearean comedies they're driven towards hijinks and romance at the end of the story. But I forgot to check my notes, but I think it's Henry V that has this most famous masculine speech of all time. I got to see it performed in London at the Globe Theatre, and I just remember being in tears about how magnificent that speech was. And every single inspiring speech that Aragorn or William Wallace has given to the troops, the ideas of those speeches all go back to Shakespeare. And it's like every inspiring moment you've ever heard expressed in the most powerful language possible in the history of the English language. So, but the reason I bring up Shakespeare and Henry V and William Wallace and Star Wars is all of these great stories that impacted me would have a strong idea of masculinity. They'd have a strong idea of femininity. And it wouldn't mean that, the boy tells the girl to go make him a sandwich and the girl doesn't do anything exciting. There is heroism for male and female characters, but masculinity and femininity give context to heroism. If you go look at my Twitter, my Twitter is full of cutesy stuff. I love cartoony, cutesy stuff. But that can't be the only thing. What clicked for me is that the appeal of kind of cartoony, cutesy stuff is it reminds you of childhood, and it reminds you of the innocence that you would want to protect or see preserved. You want to see kids like Charlie Brown have a good time growing up and have fun with your dog and kick the football. You like cute little anime pictures because maybe it kind of evokes the idea of a little child in your mind, and you as a parent would want to protect and love your own children. And then the counterpart to that is sort of the violence of masculinity, where you want to beat up bad guys and defeat evil and restore peace to the realm. And these go together. One is more nurturing, more about caring for the cute little, I don't know, the adorable little anime girl who's sort of like a cute little kid. That's almost like a feminine, nurturing aspect. Oh, what a cutie! I wish I had a daughter like that. Kids are so cute; they're so funny. And the heroic, violent thing of let's go out and beat up some terrorists so that we stop evil. And I think that if you have a politics which says this is bad, or a worldview which says this creates oppression in our world, because it tells people they have to be masculine or they have to be feminine, they have to act in one particular way. Well, I don't think stories tell me that I have to be masculine or feminine. Stories represent beautiful ideas that I carry with me into the real world. And this is sort of, I think, the appeal of Jordan Peterson's, psychological analysis of stories that is clicking with so many people. But Diversity in Comics has put an interesting spin on this idea in talking about Thundercats Roar. I did have that same gut level dislike for the style, and I hope that the CalArt style kind of evolves beyond Steven Universe. Oh, I think that Charles Schulz would be the perfect thing if you want a cutesy style, but you don't want sort of this off-putting Cartoon Network look. I think Schulz already figured out the perfection of the cute style, and every cartoonist who successfully creates an appealing cartoon style has to owe at least some debt of gratitude to Charles Schulz. This is one of the big appeals of Ben Hapke and Zeta the Space Girl to me, is that he has a very Schulzian way of giving his young girl and young boy characters this life and energy in very simple, very expressive line work. Jeff Smith's Bone is much more tightly controlled, but also not just Schulz. It's not like Schulz is the only cartoonist in history to have this, but Walt Kelly's Pogo. I think that American comic artists may have nailed this a little bit more than even Japanese artists still, which could be a bit controversial. All the weebs are going to roast me. But I think the chibi style is something very distinct from the, not just cutesy, but cute and human style of some of the best American cartoonists, and I think the best Japanese artists pay attention to this as well, and they incorporate it, and that's their style. That's the whole point. So let's wrap this up, and let's wrap up all these tangents and put a bow on it. I think the best art style looks at multiple kinds of references and starts to bring these together and harmonize them, and it's constantly adapting and constantly changing, whether that's a more action-oriented type of story or a more sweet, childhood innocence type of story. You're still looking at multiple types of ideas and, plucking the best out of it. And this has been sort of the big takeaway for me to finish my story, to not just have it sit in my head and daydream about it for the rest of my life, but to return to it critically. And I think the big thing I've learned from reading so many stories and thinking about so many comics from people in the community is to get to the point and remember why it is you want to tell this story in the first place. And I think you're going to see that reflected in the work I do for this channel. And let us, by all means, keep talking about this cool stuff in comics and cartoons and animation. So, #1 Marmaduke fan, I love you guys. Do check out my video roasting Dale Eaglesham if you haven't already. I've been getting some great feedback. In my humble, unbiased opinion, I think that's my best satire yet, and I think it's the only video you ever need to watch on Twitter drama that will not make you sad and depressed about Twitter drama, but will actually put a big smile on your face. I love you guys, and I'll catch you later.